Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why kids seem to just know some things about the world that aren't quite right, and how they get those ideas? Well, this new study dives deep into how young children understand fairness and differences between people. And it turns out, what they learn or don't learn from adults has a massive impact. It is pretty mind-blowing to think about, but even tiny tots are noticing the inequalities around them. By the time they're 4 years old, they're already linking certain races with higher or lower wealth, and they're starting to form opinions about who is good at what. This isn't just about noticing differences, though. It is about how they explain those differences. The big question researchers wanted to understand is, how do children make sense of the world's unfairness? And can we help them understand it better? So here is the core idea. Scientists have found that when kids see that some people have more than others, or that certain groups are treated differently, they tend to think it is because those people are just born that way. Maybe they're smarter or naturally better at certain things, or just built differently. They lean towards what scientists call essentialist explanations. It's like saying, that is just how they are. And this is where it gets a bit worrying. When kids think inequalities are just natural, it can lead to some pretty bad stuff down the line. It can make them less motivated in school, thinking if they're not good at something, it is because they're just not smart enough, not because they haven't had the right chances. It can also lead to them favoring some groups over others, or developing prejudiced ideas. It basically locks in the status quo, making kids think that unfairness is just the way things are and should be. Now, it is not like kids are tiny geniuses who come up with these ideas all on their own as some sort of deep philosophical insight. It seems to be a more fundamental way their brains try to make sense of things. Researchers have found these kinds of essentialist ways of thinking emerging very early, even in babies, and it shows up across all sorts of different cultures. It is like our brains have a default setting that looks for inherent qualities to explain differences rather than looking at the bigger picture of circumstances. Let's dive into how they tested this. Imagine a made-up world with two groups, the Blarks and the Orps. The researchers told kids that the Blarks had way more money than the Orps. Then they asked the kids why they thought this happened. Were the Blarks smarter or better workers? Or did something happen a long time ago? Maybe they found gold that made them rich. What they found was that young children overwhelmingly picked the smarter or better worker explanation. And here is the kicker. The more kids believed the difference was due to the Blarks being inherently better, the more they liked the Blarks and thought the whole situation was fair. That's a pretty direct link between how you explain something and how you feel about it and how you judge its fairness. And this isn't just about fictional aliens. In the real world, kids might think people are poor because they're lazy, or that men are better at math because they're naturally more brilliant. They might even think moms do more housework because they're just supposed to. This essentialist thinking, this idea that differences are all about who people are on the inside, really holds them back from seeing how circumstances play a huge role. It can lead to more prejudice, more stereotyping, and a real resistance to wanting to change things or even try harder themselves. Now, you might think, well, kids hear these things from adults, right? And yes, cultural messages can definitely boost these essentialist ideas. But the research suggests it is more than just what they're told. It seems to be a deeper, more fundamental way kids try to understand the world. It is almost a default setting that needs to be steered in a different direction. So, what can we do about it? One thing the paper points out is that many parents are hesitant to talk about social inequalities with their kids, thinking they're too young. But this study says that actually hurts more than it helps. When adults stay silent, kids are left to their own devices and they tend to fall back on those essentialist explanations. It's like a vacuum that gets filled with potentially harmful ideas. But here is the hopeful part. Kids are actually pretty smart. They can understand that inequalities are caused by external factors, like history, opportunities, or what society expects. The key is that someone needs to tell them. They don't naturally come up with these structural explanations on their own. They need adults to explicitly point out these external causes. Think about it like learning to read. You don't just pick up a book and magically learn to read. You need someone to teach you the letters, the sounds, the rules. It's the same with understanding inequality. Kids need explicit guidance to see how things like historical events, laws, or even just the way a game is set up can create advantages or disadvantages. And this is where educators come in, and why this research has huge implications for teachers. To teach kids about structural causes, you yourself need to understand them. And honestly, the causes of things like racial or gender inequality are incredibly complex. Many adults don't even fully grasp them and are often unaware of the scale of certain disparities. So, To explain these things to children in a way they can understand, educators need a solid knowledge base. The research shows a really strong connection between education and understanding these structural causes. Adults who have had more years of schooling, especially in subjects like history and biology, are much less likely to believe in essentialist explanations for inequality. They're more likely to see how social systems and historical events shape people's lives and opportunities. This means that highly educated teachers, those with a broad liberal arts background, are in the best position to help children develop a structural worldview. They have the knowledge to explain these complex issues in simple terms and to guide kids away from those harmful essentialist shortcuts. It is not just about knowing how to teach reading or math, it is about having a deep understanding of the world that can be passed on. Some might ask, do teachers really need all this deep knowledge? How often will these topics even come up? But the answer is these topics come up constantly, even if we don't always see them. Children notice differences in how well their classmates do in school. They see inequalities in their own homes. They're exposed to current events. Educators have countless opportunities to gently, and in a child-friendly way, highlight the structural reasons behind these differences. And importantly, this transmission of worldview happens both explicitly, when teachers talk about causes, and implicitly. Even the way a teacher comforts a struggling student or talks about effort versus innate ability can signal their own beliefs about why people succeed or fail. If a teacher implicitly believes some kids are just math people and others aren't, that message gets passed on, impacting students' motivation and their own beliefs. So, what does this mean for policy? The paper suggests a couple of things. One is pretty straightforward, raising the education requirements for teachers, especially in early childhood and elementary education. The US lags behind many other developed countries in this regard. By requiring more education, we ensure teachers have that broader knowledge base needed to foster structural thinking. Another important idea is to increase teacher pay. When teaching is better compensated, it becomes a more attractive career. This can draw in more college graduates, including those with strong liberal arts backgrounds, who might have otherwise pursued different paths. Better pay can also signal higher prestige for the profession, which is crucial. And finally, expanding programs like teacher loan forgiveness can make a career in teaching more financially accessible, especially for those pursuing broader liberal arts degrees. This could help ensure that more bright, well-educated individuals choose to become teachers. All in all, this research adds another strong argument for valuing and investing in highly educated teachers. It is not just about subject matter knowledge, but about developing a worldview that can be shared, shaping how the next generation understands the world and their place in it. Now, it is important to acknowledge that this research is still developing. There are still questions about the exact links between essentialism and certain social outcomes. And scientists are having robust debates about how quickly we should translate these findings into practice. The pace of scientific discovery is often slow and careful, and sometimes that clashes with the urgency of social problems. It's a delicate balance. But even with those nuances, one thing is crystal clear: kids are creating sophisticated beliefs about the world, including social issues, much earlier than we often realize, and these beliefs have a lasting impact. So, to wrap it up, children are incredibly curious and capable thinkers who are constantly trying to make sense of the world, including its inequalities. They tend to default to essentialist explanations, which can unfortunately lead to negative outcomes. But with the right guidance from knowledgeable educators, they can learn to understand the structural causes of these inequalities. By supporting teachers through adequate education and compensation, we equip them to provide these crucial structural explanations. This isn't just about academic success. It is about raising a generation that understands fairness, empathy, and the power of systemic change. It is about building a more just and equitable future. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think kids are aware of inequalities earlier than we give them credit for? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this explanation helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.